Have you ever noticed something strange about your relationships? People open up to you very quickly, sometimes within minutes. They tell you their deepest pain, their heartbreak, their trauma, and you didn't even ask. You just listened. If you are an INFJ, this probably happens all the time. People feel safe around you. But there is another side to this. Many INFJs notice something else. The people who come into their lives are often emotionally wounded. They are healing from trauma, from abandonment, from toxic relationships, or from years of emotional neglect. And somehow, they find you, almost like a magnet. So why does this happen? Why do emotionally wounded people feel drawn to INFJs? Is it coincidence? Or is there something deeper in the INFJ personality that naturally attracts people who are hurting? Today we will explore the real psychology behind this pattern. And if you are an INFJ, you may finally understand why this keeps happening in your life. 1. INFJs naturally radiate emotional safety. One of the biggest reasons emotionally wounded people feel drawn to INFJs is simple. INFJs feel safe. Very safe. When people meet an INFJ, something subtle happens. The INFJ listens deeply, not casually, not half-heartedly, but with full presence. In modern psychology, this is called deep empathic listening, and it is rare. Most people listen just enough to respond, but INFJs listen to understand. They read between the lines. They notice tone, body language, energy shifts, and this creates a powerful psychological effect. People feel seen. For many emotionally wounded individuals, this feeling is unfamiliar. They have spent years being misunderstood, ignored, dismissed, or judged. Then suddenly they meet someone who simply listens, without interruption, without criticism, without trying to control the conversation. This emotional atmosphere is deeply healing, and the wounded person feels it instantly. They may not understand why they trust the INFJ so quickly, but something inside them relaxes. Their nervous system calms. Their guard slowly lowers. And before they realize it, they are sharing things they rarely talk about. This is why INFJs often become emotional confidants. Friends tell them secrets. Strangers share personal stories. Even coworkers reveal painful experiences. The INFJ becomes a safe container for emotional truth. But there is an important reality here. Emotional safety is incredibly magnetic, especially to someone who has been emotionally hurt. So wounded people naturally move toward the INFJ's calm presence. 2. INFJs have powerful empath energy. Another reason INFJs attract emotionally wounded people is their empathic sensitivity. INFJs are often described as emotional empaths. They do not just hear feelings. They feel them, sometimes almost physically. When someone speaks about pain, the INFJ senses it deeply. Their facial expression softens. Their voice becomes gentle. Their attention becomes focused. And the wounded person notices this immediately. Because most people do not respond this way. In many environments, vulnerability feels risky. People fear being judged, or dismissed, or told they are overreacting. But when someone speaks to an INFJ, they sense genuine compassion, real empathy, not performative kindness, not forced sympathy, but authentic emotional understanding. Psychologists call this emotional attunement. It is the ability to tune into another person's emotional state. And INFJs are exceptionally skilled at it. They often know someone is hurting before the person says anything. A slight pause, a forced smile, a change in tone. These subtle signals stand out clearly to an INFJ. And when the INFJ responds with empathy, it creates an invisible bond. The wounded person feels understood, even if they have not fully explained their story. This is powerful, because emotional wounds often come from years of feeling misunderstood. So when someone finally feels emotionally recognized, they hold on to that connection, sometimes very tightly. That is why emotionally wounded people often gravitate toward INFJs again and again. They feel something rare. Emotional resonance. 3. INFJs give people space to be honest. Another quiet strength of the INFJ personality is emotional patience. INFJs do not rush people. They do not force conversations. They simply create space. And that space becomes an invitation. When someone sits with an INFJ, silence is not uncomfortable. It is peaceful. This calm emotional environment encourages honesty. People start to say things they normally hide. They admit fears, regrets, past mistakes, painful memories. Why? Because the INFJ does not react with shock or criticism. They respond with curiosity and compassion. This creates psychological permission. The wounded person feels safe enough to be real. And once that door opens, emotional stories begin to flow. Many INFJs notice something surprising. They rarely ask deep questions. Yet people reveal deep truths anyway. This happens because authenticity attracts authenticity. INFJs tend to be internally honest. They value emotional depth. And wounded individuals often crave that depth. After years of shallow conversations and emotional disconnection, they feel relieved to meet someone who welcomes real feelings. So the INFJ becomes a place where hidden emotions finally surface. But this dynamic has a hidden challenge. If the INFJ is not careful, they can become overwhelmed. Because many people will unconsciously rely on them for emotional healing. 4. INFJs see potential in broken people. Another powerful reason INFJs attract emotionally wounded individuals is their ability to see potential. Where others see damage, INFJs often see possibility. Where others see dysfunction, INFJs see hidden pain. And where others walk away, INFJs often lean closer. This perspective comes from the INFJ's intuitive thinking pattern. INFJs naturally look beneath behavior. They ask deeper questions. Why is this person acting this way? What happened to them? What pain shaped this behavior? This compassionate curiosity can be incredibly healing for wounded individuals. Because many people with emotional trauma feel labeled. They are called difficult, too sensitive, too intense, too complicated. But when they meet an INFJ, the reaction is different. The INFJ sees their story, their struggle, their humanity, and that can feel incredibly validating. Sometimes it is the first time someone has looked past their defensive behaviors and recognized the hurt underneath. So the wounded person feels hope. They feel understood. They feel accepted. And naturally, they want to stay close to the person who sees them this way. But this dynamic can create a complicated emotional pattern. Because INFJs sometimes take on the role of emotional healer, even when they did not intend to. 5. INFJs naturally become emotional healers. Many INFJs do not plan to become emotional support systems. It just happens. People come to them for advice, for comfort, for understanding. Over time, the INFJ becomes known as the person who helps others process pain. Friends call them during crises. Family members confide in them. Even acquaintances seek their perspective. This is not random. It happens because INFJs combine empathy with insight. They do not only feel emotions. They analyze them. They connect patterns. They see underlying causes. So when someone shares a painful story, the INFJ often offers thoughtful reflections. Not harsh criticism. Not empty reassurance. But meaningful perspective. And for someone struggling emotionally, this feels incredibly valuable. They feel guided, understood, supported. So they keep returning to the INFJ for emotional clarity. But here is something many INFJs eventually realize. Some people come for healing, but never leave the wounded mindset. And that can slowly drain the INFJ's emotional energy. 6. INFJs are calm during emotional chaos. Another reason wounded individuals feel drawn to INFJs is their emotional stability during difficult conversations. When people express anger, sadness, or confusion, many listeners feel uncomfortable. They interrupt. They try to change the subject. Or they offer quick solutions just to end the tension. But INFJs usually remain calm. They sit with the emotion. They allow the moment to exist. This calm response is incredibly grounding for someone who feels emotionally overwhelmed. It signals something important. Your emotions are not too much. You are not a burden. You can speak freely here. And for someone who has been repeatedly told they are too sensitive or dramatic, this message is deeply comforting. So the wounded person begins associating the INFJ with emotional relief. And that emotional relief becomes addictive. They return to the INFJ again and again, sometimes without realizing how much emotional weight they are placing on that relationship. 7. INFJs rarely judge people harshly. Judgment is one of the biggest fears people carry when sharing emotional wounds. They fear being labeled weak, or dramatic, or irresponsible. But INFJs tend to approach people with curiosity rather than judgment. They ask questions. They try to understand motivations. They explore the emotional context behind decisions. This non-judgmental mindset creates a rare psychological space. People feel safe revealing mistakes, regrets, embarrassing experiences, and even morally complex situations. Instead of rejection, they encounter understanding. For wounded individuals, this feels revolutionary. Many of them have been criticized repeatedly for their emotional struggles. So when they meet someone who listens without condemnation, it feels like emotional oxygen. They breathe easier. They speak more openly. And the INFJ becomes a trusted emotional witness. But this openness can also blur boundaries if the INFJ is not careful. Because emotional availability attracts emotional dependence. And sometimes the INFJ becomes the person everyone leans on, while quietly carrying their own emotional weight alone. 8. ENFJs notice pain that others miss. Many emotionally wounded people walk through life feeling invisible. Their pain is hidden, sometimes very carefully hidden. They smile in public. They appear functional. They laugh during conversations. But underneath, there is unresolved hurt. And most people never notice. But INFJs often do. The INFJ personality is highly observant, not just with facts, but with emotional signals. A forced laugh, a slight hesitation, a distant look in someone's eyes. These small details stand out clearly to an INFJ, while others may overlook them. INFJs sense that something deeper is happening. They may gently ask a simple question. Are you okay? You seem a little quiet today. Or they may simply sit nearby with quiet presence. And that presence alone can open the door. For someone carrying emotional wounds, being noticed like this can feel overwhelming. In a good way. Because many wounded individuals have spent years hiding their pain. Sometimes they hide it because they believe no one cares. Sometimes because they fear rejection. But when an INFJ quietly acknowledges their emotional state, something powerful happens. The person realizes they are not invisible. Someone saw through the mask. And instead of judgment, they received compassion. That moment can create instant trust. And trust is extremely valuable to someone with emotional wounds. So they feel drawn to the INFJ again. Not because the INFJ tried to fix them, but because the INFJ noticed them. And sometimes, being truly noticed is the first step toward healing. 9. INFJs offer meaning instead of simple advice. When emotionally wounded people talk about their struggles, they are not always looking for quick solutions. Often they are searching for meaning. They want to understand why their experiences happened. Why certain patterns keep repeating. Why relationships break down. Why they feel the way they do. This is where INFJs naturally shine. The INFJ personality is deeply reflective. They think about human behavior. They analyze emotional patterns. They explore the psychological meaning behind life events. So when someone shares a painful story with an INFJ, the response is different from most conversations. Instead of immediately saying what the person should do, the INFJ might gently reflect back deeper insights. They might say something like, "It sounds like you were trying to protect yourself." Or maybe that situation made you feel abandoned. Or perhaps that pattern started much earlier in your life. These reflections help the wounded person connect the dots. Suddenly their experiences start making sense. Their emotions feel valid. Their story feels understandable. This type of emotional insight can be incredibly powerful. Because emotional wounds often grow in confusion. People feel pain but cannot explain it. They repeat unhealthy patterns but cannot see why. The INFJ's intuitive insight helps illuminate these hidden connections. And when someone finally understands their emotional story, they often feel relief. So the wounded person begins to associate the INFJ with clarity, with understanding, with emotional wisdom. And that makes the INFJ incredibly magnetic to people who are searching for answers about their pain. 10. INFJs accept emotional complexity. Many emotionally wounded individuals feel like they are too much for other people. Too emotional. Too sensitive. Too complicated. They have probably heard these labels many times. In friendships. In family conversations. In past relationships. So they begin hiding parts of themselves. They simplify their story. They avoid talking about deeper feelings. Because they expect people to lose patience. But INFJs tend to react very differently. The INFJ mind is comfortable with emotional complexity. In fact, they are often drawn to it. They enjoy understanding layered personalities, contradictory emotions, and complicated life experiences. So when someone explains a messy emotional situation, the INFJ does not become overwhelmed. They become curious. They want to understand the full picture, the history, the motivations, the emotional patterns. This reaction feels incredibly refreshing to someone who has been dismissed in the past. Instead of being told they are too complicated, they meet someone who is interested in their complexity. This validation creates a deep sense of acceptance. And acceptance is something emotionally wounded individuals crave more than anything. They want to feel that their story does not scare people away. When an INFJ shows patience with emotional complexity, the wounded person feels relief. They feel safe being their full self, even the parts that are messy or unresolved. And naturally, they want to stay close to the person who accepts them without fear. 11. INFJs often carry wounds of their own. One final reason emotionally wounded people feel drawn to INFJs is something very personal. Many INFJs carry their own emotional scars. Not always visible, not always discussed openly, but present. INFJs often grow up feeling different from others. They may feel misunderstood, emotionally isolated, or deeply sensitive in environments that value emotional toughness. Because of this, many INFJs develop strong emotional awareness early in life. They learn to observe people carefully. They learn to read moods. They learn to navigate emotional tension. Over time, this creates deep empathy. The INFJ understands pain not only intellectually, but personally. They know what it feels like to struggle internally. They know what it feels like to search for meaning. And when someone else describes emotional suffering, the INFJ's response carries genuine understanding. Not just sympathy, but recognition. The wounded person senses this. Sometimes subconsciously. They feel that the INFJ understands their pain in a way others do not. And this shared emotional depth creates connection. It creates emotional resonance. Two people recognizing something familiar in each other's inner world. But this dynamic can also create challenges. Because wounded people sometimes feel safest around others who understand suffering. And INFJs may find themselves surrounded by people who are still healing. Which is why boundaries become extremely important for the INFJ personality. Understanding compassion is powerful, but protecting emotional energy is equally important. So why do INFJs attract people with emotional wounds? The answer is not a single reason. It is a combination of qualities that are rare in today's fast-paced world. INFJs listen deeply. They notice subtle emotional signals. They create calm, non-judgmental space. They seek meaning in people's stories. And they accept emotional complexity instead of rejecting it. These qualities make them feel incredibly safe to others. Especially to individuals who have spent years feeling misunderstood or emotionally alone. To someone carrying unresolved pain, meeting an INFJ can feel like discovering a quiet refuge. A place where they are not judged, not rushed, not dismissed, but truly heard. And that experience is powerful. However, this emotional magnetism also brings responsibility. Because INFJs cannot heal everyone. And they are not meant to carry every emotional burden they encounter. Healthy boundaries are essential. Empathy must be balanced with self-protection. Compassion must exist alongside personal limits. When INFJs learn to protect their energy while still offering their natural understanding, something beautiful happens. They continue to help others, but without losing themselves in the process. Their empathy becomes a gift, not a burden, and their presence remains what it has always been, a quiet light, guiding people through emotional darkness, while still honoring their own journey toward peace.